There's nothing like a brilliant, kind, creative smarty. I'm telling you, it's just like my favorite kind of person. And speaking of brilliant, kind, creative, and smart, please welcome one of our favorite smarties, Dr. Emily Sáenz. Dr. Sáenz, would you please reveal yourself?
Hello.
Hi, how you doing?
Yes, fine. That was such a nice intro. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And I'm going to let you take it away, and I'll see you on the other side.
Sounds great. Hello, friends. It's lovely to see you again. I'm coming at you from Fort Worth, Texas. It is in the 80s here today. So we are not sure if we should wear coats or not. We've got them out just in case. I'm thrilled to be with you. Thank you to the Met team for having me. I have an unusual position at my campus, and I want to tell you a little bit about it before I start, just to help you understand the flexibility that I use in my lessons. I'm at a 6th through 12th campus, which is 6th grade through 12th grade. I teach a mixture of ages there, and I began as the head choir director, but this last year I've taken over the theater department as well. And since theater and choir are kissing cousins, that's been a really convenient thing. So the stuff that I brought for you today is stuff that I've used in my theater classroom, but I've also used in my choir classroom and found success equally in both places, and found rewarding things about both. So I'm going to jump in and talk with you a little bit about Cendrillon today, which is one of my favorite productions. This is a great one because it's one that kids feel comfortable with even before they go to see it, just because they know the plot, which helps a lot. Let me scoot this over so y'all can see my little PowerPoint here. Oops, it moved it. Oh, well, that was neat. So this is a great show. It's a great for starters. If you've got kids who've never been before, Cendrillon is a really great place for them to begin, because they will know a little bit about the plot before you even get to the movie theater, or before you even start streaming in your classroom. And that really, really helps. So when I begin with shows that we know, I like to begin in a couple of different ways. And these are just some important things that I like to share with educators. When you're introducing opera, these are the three main things I like to think of. Number one, engage with plot and major characters. Start with things that are really easy for kids to latch onto and feel comfortable with. And when I say kids, I do mean 18-year-olds as well, because they also need some comfortable ideas before we expose them to things that can be scary, like operatic singing. And with Cendrillon, that's really, really easy, because most of them know the story of Cinderella. Number two, honesty is your friend. I say this because I have been in the opera audience before, and I've felt bored, just as I've watched movies before and I've felt bored. And I think it's important to be honest about that, because it's important for kids to know that something doesn't have to be engaging 100% of the time for you to enjoy it and learn from it and be respectful to it. And once we have that conversation, it helps relieve the burden from the students, so they don't feel like, oh gosh, I'm going to go see something that's 3 hours long. It's in a different language. The singing is not something I'm used to hearing. I'm probably going to be bored, and then dismiss the whole experience, right? So I tell them, I'm going to give you tools so that you can learn and enjoy and feel comfortable with what we're about to see. And if part of the time you feel confused, or you feel like you want to get up and walk around, that's a normal experience, and that's okay. And it doesn't mean that you need to cancel out the whole experience in your head. So until they develop their own love and desire and stamina for sitting through a whole opera, that really, really is helpful to them. Finally, I find with all things in my classroom that moving and creating help us to bond with things. So we stand up and sit down and move around and jump around and touch our feet. And we do that in my choir classes and in my theater classes, because it just helps us all to get the blood pumping, but it helps us to really connect with what we're talking about. So that's where we're going to start with Cendrillon here. Is with discussion of the plot and some ways to discuss plot that get you up on your feet. So this is just one way that you can discuss the plot here. Since the story of Cinderella is one that many, many people know, this is a great exercise for this particular show. We start all the kids standing in a circle, especially for my students who have been at home for the last year and maybe have spent too much time with their cell phones. We always start in a circle, making eye contact with one another, so that we can just remember to connect as a group. And from being in the classroom for the last couple of months, that there's a lot of us that have forgotten how to make eye contact and have normal conversations with other humans. So we always begin with that. Then I select one bold soul who's going to tell us the story of Cinderella, and they begin speaking from their part of the circle, and they tell the story. As they tell it, members of our circle jump into the middle and act out the different characters. And I tell the kids, you can be characters that for example, if you want to be a stepsister and you hear a stepsister is going to be part of this particular part of the plot, you can jump in. But also, if you want to be a broom, be a broom. If you want to be a chair or a slipper, there's always someone that wants to be the slipper, which I love. Do that. And it just makes for these hilarious moments where kids, turn into rocks for some reason. I just love it. So when we are doing scenes like this, I want everybody to get a chance. And at the end of each little part of the story, I will clear the set. So have them all go back to the edges of the circle, so that way we don't have the same 4 to 5 kids doing all the work, which happens sometimes. Some of the quieter ones stand off to the side. And I respectfully request that everybody jump into the middle at least once during the story to play a character. So that's a great way to tell the story. It gets them up and moving and just kind of refreshes them. It's also really helpful for our English language learners because it gives them a visual along with the oral telling of the story. And that kind of can help cue them if they are just learning English. Another way that we tell the story is to divide up into teams. I divide into teams in different ways. If I'm in a choir class, I'll divide them by their voice part. Sometimes I do it by birth order or height. Sometimes we'll do, I have students take personality quizzes a lot to get to learn more about themselves. And so, for example, if we're doing the Enneagram, I will say, okay, all of my 2s are going to be on one team and all of my 4s are going to be on one team. Whenever we did this exercise in my musical theater class, I had them divide themselves into teams by saying, if you feel that as part of the triple threat of being a musical theater person, dance is your best skill, go over here. If you feel acting is your best, go here. If you feel singing is your best, go here. And then they clumped up in those groups, and that gave us some interesting points of discussion for when we did the next part of this activity. So once they've divided themselves into groups, we give them about 5 minutes to use every person in the group, no props, to create a statue of a pivotal moment in the traditional Cinderella story. And everyone in the group needs to be involved in some capacity. If people don't feel comfortable touching one another, that's absolutely fine. They can find a way to be involved. And then I just circulate the room and watch what's happening. I do these kind of things a lot towards the beginning of the year because they help me identify my leaders really, really early on. I learned a lot about team dynamics just by watching them do this kind of activity. So it can give you some really nice insight into who you've got in your room, in your ensemble. Finally, then they will get up and create their statue for the class. And then the class can discuss, what do we think they're showing us? And then they can share out a little bit about the statue itself and what moment they're showing us in the storyline. So that's a great one for getting up and moving. Next, I want to talk a little bit about designing and creating. So after we've moved around, gotten up on our feet and stuff, then we kind of dive into the creative work of looking at an opera. We still at this point have not listened to any of the music yet. I saved that for the last. The exception with that is if we're doing a show, for example, like Carmen, where there's a piece of music in the show that they've heard a bunch of times in commercials and in elevators that they never knew was opera, but now they know. Sometimes I'll lead with music in that case, but on the whole, I really do not. So the next thing we're going to do is study some photos of the Cendrillon costumes. And there are some incredible sketches of those costumes available in the educational materials. And then, of course, you can find some really great still rehearsal shots of the costumes on the website. We start by just staring at the pictures. I usually give 30 seconds of silence for them to look at the pictures. Number one, because it helps them focus. But number two, because studies are showing that children, particularly teenagers, don't get enough silence, and their brains really need little snippets of time where there's no noise. And so I try and generate silent moments within my lessons just to provide some time for their ears to calm down. And especially since we've just done a bunch of moving around, we need to cleanse the palate a little bit with some silence. So we take a look at those costumes. We talk about what we like. We talk about what character we think we're looking at here. And then we begin to talk about what it would be like to wear those costumes. Does that look itchy? What fabric do you think that is? How does wearing a costume like that affect the way that your body moves? How does it affect the way you breathe? And how might that affect an opera singer? Then we talk about their favorite looks. What do they like best? What would they want to wear? What would they want to put on someone else? Who would they want to wear the costume? You can kind of riff on the topic just to get them engaged. And then we move into creating their own designs. So I'm always looking for ways to use our masks that we are wearing and engage the mask in the creative process so that it becomes a vehicle for expression and not something that we're hiding behind. And so we use masks. I mean, sometimes I'll have them swing masks around on their fingers while they're breathing or things like that. We use them, wave them around different ways. If you, like me, have a bunch of extra masks in your room, I have a bunch of washable ones. And so that way I can have them use masks for designing and movement and then just take them home and wash them. And that way we're not wasting, but we're still using them. So I had the kids design some mask details based on the looks that they loved. So here are some of the looks from Cendrillon. They're a feast. They're an absolute feast for the eye. And we talk about the hairstyles. How does the hair complement or contrast with the outfit? We talk about colors. What do colors represent in shows, particularly in opera? And then we use that inspiration. And I've got I provide paper mask drawings like the one you see here, but also if you've got the resources to provide each kid with a new paper mask and a bunch of materials to do something special to that mask, that's really, really awesome. So it's a really nice filler, but it gets them creating and connecting and thinking outside the lines. Another way to do this same exercise is to use stage makeup. So this is what I did with my theater class, is we use the template that you see here on the screen. And after looking at the costumes that you saw on the previous slide, they designed a makeup look, a maskless makeup look that they felt best complemented the character. And they had options. They could either do the makeup on the paper here, and I actually brought the stage makeup kits out and they made up the paper, or they could do their own makeup and give us a little show for the class with their makeup. So that was really fun. Plus we got to learn some of the best practices for care and cleaning of makeup utensils and basic etiquette for dressing rooms and things like that. The next thing that we do is really start diving in with the actual opera itself. So because Cendrillon is one where we've got so many different versions of this particular story across many cultures, across hundreds of years, we have many, many versions of Cendrillon, and there's some really beautiful activities in the Met Ed Guide, including stories from around the world about princesses and slippers. But for ours, for my purposes this year, we looked at the classic Disney one. Then we looked at my favorite production, which is the Rodgers and Hammerstein version. I love the one with Whitney Houston, probably because it came out about the time that I was 14. So this was just like total magic to me. And then we compare that to the opera itself. So we start by looking here at some of the publication materials. What do we see that's different on the posters? How is the storyline different just from looking at the posters? What do the colors tell us? What about the costuming? They come up with so many incredible things just by, being encouraged to have a discussion. If you were going to be a character in one of these posters, which one would you be? Which poster would you pick, etc. Then we go through and watch some of the scenes that correspond. So in Act 2, in Act 2 of Cendrillon, we've got the duet where they meet for the first time, Cendrillon and the prince. Then we watch the stage version of Do I Love You from Cinderella. And finally, the famous So This Is Love scene from the Disney, which I just love when they're out wandering by the fountains. I have them jot down some of the qualities of each of the duets. What are the vocal lines doing? How does the music make you feel? If this duet was a dessert, what dessert would it be? If this duet was a video game, what video game would it be? We just try and make connections across different things, and compare and contrast how the music is telling the story of their love story differently. And why do we think that Rodgers and Hammerstein told their love story in this particular way and Disney tweaked it to be like this? Right? What is the purpose of that? How does that change the characterizations in our mind? And how does it affect what we think might be the plot for the opera? Finally, I like to tie in every opera that we look at with something that's good for us as human beings. And we talk a lot, inquire about how we are not learning just to be good musicians or good singers or good actors. We're learning to be good humans. I mean, that's our job, right? And music and art and theater are such useful tools for making us all better. And so there is a quality of Cinderella that is across all of the stories that you study about her, which is that she's kind. In almost every single version of Cinderella, including the opera, her kindness is one of the foremost traits that we see. In some cases, it's spoken of before her beauty is discussed. And so we talk about, what is that like? And what does kindness look like if you're a person like Cinderella, like Cendrillon, who has been humbled and is forced to do tasks that she knows are beneath her, and she does them anyway with a good heart. And what does that translate to in our own hallways? What are some things that you're asked to do that are humbling to you that you could maybe adjust and have a more kind worldview about? The other thing that we talked about with this particular opera is that there's a really beautiful element of forgiveness that is present in this particular version of Cinderella that's not necessarily in the other ones. In the Sondheim, Into the Woods, there is a moment which comes from the original story where birds come and peck the eyeballs out of the stepsisters and the stepmother. And it's such a fabulous, you're like, yes, haha, as the audience. But in the operatic version, Cendrillon chooses to forgive her stepsisters and her stepmother. And there's some healing that goes on at the end of that show that doesn't happen in some of the other ones, including the Disney version. So we talk a little bit about how does that change the storyline for us? And then I have them journal, is there anyone that you are carrying around anger towards that you maybe should let go of, that it might help you feel lighter and freer in the world if you were able to forgive. And sometimes they want to share those kind of things, and I love having discussions about that kind of thing. And sometimes they want to keep it to themselves, and that's really great too. But I think at the end of the day, anytime that we can include qualities of kindness and forgiveness and character building and integrity into the classroom and tie it into opera, I think it's just a real team building moment for everybody. So there is Cendrillon. Let's move on. Oh, and these are some of the activities that we did for kindness and forgiveness. So in order to emulate Cinderella's kindness, we selected some people on our campus who we felt like could use a little note of encouragement. And particularly, we were looking for people who get overlooked or their work goes unnoticed. So we talked a lot about the people who make our lunches every day in the cafeteria, the people who come and clean out our trash cans day in and day out, the people who come and clean our school, even though we're in a pandemic and it's a scary time, they kept their job and they keep our environment clean. How can we be kind to them? How can we thank them and show them grace? And so that we wrote notes and passed those out. And then there's the exercise I was just telling you about kind of re-examining moments in our lives that might require some forgiveness on our part and what that looks like. Let's talk about Barbieri. So this is a great, great show. This, as I mentioned earlier, there are some shows that you can start with music and lead with that. And there are some that you should lead with plot. Most you should lead with plot. Barbieri is one that you can start with music because we have the very famous Figaro song that they will know from Looney Tunes. Figaro, 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 Figaro. They'll have that. So they will know that song. And it's very exciting to them when they figure out, oh my gosh, this is in this opera. So this is one of my favorite activities. I have used this exact same activity as we've studied musicals and as we've studied different operas. I tweak it every time. I do it just about every year and they love it. So this is the Sweat and Sing version. We sometimes begin when I start looking at this Sweat and Sing activity, we will begin by warming up with a free video of the Richard Simmons Dance Your Pants Off or something. It's like a 1960s play, like he does these kind of funk pieces and they dance. It's all free on YouTube. So we dance our pants off with Richard Simmons, dance into the oldies, and then we start incorporating some of those moves into our Sweat and Sing. So this is how this works. I let them pick a piece from the opera. In this case, I spoon feed them that it's going to be the Largo al Factotum, which is the one that they know. They're going to know that aria. We listen to the aria. We jot down some notes about form, and we brainstorm what we think it's about. What kind of singer are we listening to? How much training do you think it took for the singer to learn to be able to do this? We jot all those things down. I like to do a visual up at the front, so a whiteboard. We discuss, you know, what does the form look like? Is this an ABA aria? Is this a strophic piece? Is it straight through? That's going to help us decide what moves we're going to do and when. Then they take a look at the bank of movements, which I've listed here below: squats, burpees, jumping jacks, planks. They can do yoga moves. They can do some of the moves that we've just done with Richard Simmons. They can Zumba. They can face dance if they're on a Zoom call. We did some of that last year. And they will take a look at the bank and then decide what moves they want to do where. If they want to work in teams, I find that especially with my groups that are a little more shy about getting up in front of everybody, teams are great for this. They can pick out which moves they want to do where. All they have to do is make sure that the moves go along with the form of the aria. So they're going to listen, they're going to hear a certain melody and maybe have one move for that melody. When the motive changes, they come up with a different move. If the original motive or melody returns, they will go back to that first move. And it helps them learn the form of the song while also just coming up with some creative things. Then I have them either, we'll do a workout class where we're going to do everybody's version of the aria, and we come in and prepare to get sweaty, and we listen to the same aria 6 times and do the different moves that each group has planned for us, with them leading from the front. Or they can submit their own very own workout video, extra points if they do it in a like 1980s style with the headbands and everything. Either way, we do the moves all together, and I lead from the front with that, even though I don't look that great while doing squats and burpees, because it's important for them to feel the teamwork, to get sweaty with one another, move around, laugh, and all the while they're listening to this aria over and over and over. And then when we go to see the opera, they are thrilled. They scream. I mean, they're just like, we know this. They're humming along with it. They don't speak Italian most of the time, so they make up their own words to it and sing along. It's really clever. Teenagers are so great. So here's another way to look at that same aria. Largo al factotum is at the very start of the show. It's in Act 1. And during this particular aria, Figaro just kind of comes on stage. The fourth wall is down. He talks straight to the crowd, straight to the audience, and he tells us how great he is in this aria, how many things he is the master of. Here is you can see the list here. These are all things that he says he's good at. He's a barber, a surgeon, he's a pharmacist, a gardener, a matchmaker. He can fix anything you put in front of him. I mean, he's just like, guess who's competent? It's me. And he sings the whole aria about it, creating that list below. So his aria becomes an introduction to his character, but it's also an advertisement for himself around town. And depending on how it's staged, oftentimes he'll be interacting with chorus members on stage who are interested in his abilities, so they can take part in his services. So we listen to the aria, we look at that translation there, and then I have them decide on one format of advertisement that they'd like to do to advertise Figaro. So they can do a radio commercial, TV commercial, podcast, a flyer, a billboard. They come up with other things as well. You know, can I create a web page for Figaro? And they work and create these advertisements for all the different skills that Figaro has. They can do it as Figaro, or they can do it as his representative marketing company. Sometimes they will come up with, you know, Instagram accounts and make Figaro one of those really famous Instagrammers that's got all the followers. So they come up with some really, really great things just to advertise him, all the ways he can help make your life better. And the humor that they bring to this particular exercise is really, really great. So we start with the aria just by listening to it. We do movements to it, we work out, then we look at the translation here, learn about the character, and tie it into a creative activity, advertising the character. This is another close-up look that I did at an aria in the show. So in Act 2, the character of Rosina sings an aria, Contro un cor, which is linked here in this PowerPoint, by the way, and the PowerPoint will be in the Google Classroom for you guys. So they're going to just listen to the aria. We're going to brainstorm words to describe the mood of the piece, and then select a modern song that they would like to perform, like on a karaoke Friday, or if they'd like to dance to the song, which can also be described by the same 5 words that they use to describe this particular aria. This is a very simple activity, not at all particular to Barbieri, and can be used as, it's a great filler. I mean, it really is. If you've got a substitute coming, this is a great activity. The sub plays the song, they write down 5 words, then they get 15 minutes to select a song and practice it, and then they can get up and karaoke in front of each other. Boom, you're tied to the opera and you filled in that class period, and it doesn't take a lot from you. There we go. So we do karaoke Fridays. I let them do, you know, solos, duets, small groups. And we talk a little bit about how the voice lesson aria, which is what this particular aria is in the show, historically has been used as a bit of a performance piece for the singer. So oftentimes singers would come in and they would take out contro un cor and put in whatever aria they actually wanted to sing there. So it would not necessarily even be Rossini. It could be an aria from any opera that they wanted, that they would want to get up on stage and sing because they just wanted to sing it, and they would put it inside this opera. So it's often humorous, it's often very exciting. So we kind of talk about what that's like to have your own, I don't know, your own opportunity to write your own moment in an opera where you get to create whatever song you want to go there. Finally, this is the third activity that I did with them for Barbieri. There are a lot of notes that are passed to one another, and this is a common trope in opera in general, but there are a lot of love notes that are passed back and forth from the Count to Rosina, and from Rosina to the Count. She writes him love letters. And so we talk a little bit about the history of fancy letter folding, and I'm going to show you a little bit of that on the next slide. We talk about, you know, what does it feel like to get a love letter? How is it different from a text? How is it different from a voice message? What are some famous love letters that you've heard about or that you've read about? Does anyone have a love letter story from your own family? Many families, have love letters saved from the Second World War or things like that. Kids love to share about this kind of thing. Then I have them write a love letter in the style of the letters that Rosina writes in the opera to the person of their choosing. So we look at the translation of some of her letters and we write in our own style. Then I provide them some templates for folding their letter in a really fancy way that reflects its contents. So these are so fascinating. Let me just show you this here. This is from the BBC. This is a really great article that's all about letter locking, which is an ancient style of folding letters in a way that allows only the person who's supposed to receive them to be able to unfold them and read them. If they're read by anyone else, it tears a seal and it's, the person who's supposed to receive the letter will know. So it takes you step by step. Look, this is all about how Mary, Queen of Scots, letter locked her letters. And we've got some really important historical characters who were letter locking. And that's something I feel like the character of Rosina might be interested in. So we take a look at that one. We also look at origami. I give them the option, if you'd like to use origami and fold your letter into some origami styles. There's, so many incredible ways to fold. Let's see, I think this is just the article about the history. I've got one in here for you that is links to YouTube videos and step-by-step instructions for how to fold different origami creatures. We've got a bunch of kids that were already doing that on their own time and we're able to step up and help. So to backtrack there, we learn about how Rosina's communicating with the Count with letters. We look at some of the translations of her letters and see what style she wrote them in. Are they really flowery? Are they very practical? Do we think she would have used a colored ink? Would it have just been black and white? We talk about all different kinds of things, and then we fold those letters in ways that are inspiring to us and hopefully try and tie in some of the content of the letter to the style of folding. Let's see if this will load. I don't know that it will. There we go. There's some beautiful letters. Look at that. Wonderful activity. And I've done it for both my theater and my choir classes, and they seem to really enjoy it. Oh, there's some of the images there. And I like these old-fashioned ones. This looks like the 90s to me. We used to write letters like that. The other thing I wanted to just remind you all, this is my last little point here, is that there are some really incredible arrangements of pieces arranged by David O. They are in our educational materials. This is my first one that I dove in with my treble choir, and they just loved it. This is the humming chorus. Many of them are in sight readable keys. This one we sight read one class. They ended up liking it so much that we sang it on a fall concert. And we did it as this particular humming chorus we did as a transition piece. So as they were coming onto the stage and getting into their spots on our risers for their performance, they were humming the humming chorus. And so not only were we learning a beautiful piece of music and tying into Madama Butterfly, but we were also learning what does it feel like to sing while moving? How does that change your breath? How does it change your intonation? What does it feel like in your body to hum while walking up a flight of stairs to come on stage? There were a lot of really great discussions about performing and singing that we were able to do thanks to those arrangements. There's my resources, as always, Canva, and then I love Google Classroom and all those materials they make available to us. And I think that's all I have for today.
Dr. Emily Sáenz, thank you so much. That was wonderful.
It was my pleasure.
Tell me if this is true or if I'm just making this up. Those beautiful materials that you shared with us may be available in our Google Drive soon in case anybody wants to access them.
Oh, yes, indeed. They shall all be there for you. And
thank you.
Anytime.
Thank you. I have to tell you, I have in my Spark file, which is where I collect all my inspirations and fascinations. I have had this article about letter locking for a long time. I'm just totally obsessed with letter
It's
locking.
so cool, right?
It's the coolest. We are such nerds, but it is the coolest.
I think it's fascinating. I love it.
So great. Thank you, Dr. Emily Sáenz. It is a pleasure to have this time with you. And thank you for your generosity and your inspiration. I love the idea of that humming chorus. I love the idea of that being the thing that gets your people on stage. Come on. So good. So
It's
good.
better than just watching 14-year-olds clomp
Just
up the stairs awkwardly. So
right.
listen to Puccini while they're clomping.
That's right. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Ah.